Iraq in 2003 was worse. 12 months of experiencing some of the purest evil that I had ever experienced, much less witnessed. I understood all too well that we were with the enemy. We were to expect the worst treatment if captured. But the atrocities that the insurgents committed against their own and their children defies explanation. There is no value for life over their evil agenda. I am convinced that God is the only one who can make anything righteous out of the Middle East. And He will. And recently He has. I didn't know that when I was writing this. It's kind of cool to see how that played out. But I've read the Bible, folks. I've read the end. Spoiler alert, God wins. That was a lot of lost time. At least for me it was. But God's perfect sense of timing is much different than ours. God's will can go scorching through space and time like a hot knife through butter and never leave so much as a grain of sand disturbed along the way. He's really good at making beauty from the ashes and showing up just in the nick of time to save the day. No questions asked, and certainly no thanks to us. It took me a long time to figure it out, but I finally learned to praise Him even in the storm, especially in the storm. It certainly was better than trying to weather everything on my own. And along the way, I never fell prey to the stereotypical pitfalls. I never got into drugs or alcohol, gambling, or any of the other major vices per se. I was determined from my childhood not to engage in those things as those before me did. But the option I chose was not a sustainable one either. Instead, I internalized it and kept pushing it down deeper and deeper until I could not possibly endure any more on my own. But God knew how stubborn I was, because that's how He made me. Over the course of 25 years, this whole process has taken more casualties than just my memory. I have entire blocks of time, in some cases years, that have been completely hidden from my memory now. But every now and then, little bits and pieces come floating back. Some drop in light as a feather, while others make a pretty abrupt impact, like a piece of emotional shrapnel. And sometimes with that comes consequences. I have hurt a lot of people, including myself. A seemingly insurmountable amount of hurts from relationships past, especially my children. I had no idea why I was unable to function as a father and a husband. Every thought or mention of Mogadishu was like a flashbang grenade going off in my face. And it really didn't help that I was obsessed with finding out, down to the last man, slot, and MOS, including my own, exactly what happened. And every time I would isolate myself more and more. I never talked about Mogadishu and rarely made mention of it, especially professionally. Most veterans I met were very cordial, and some even seemed to be even surprised. Some even impressed that I was a veteran that survived Somalia. As our history of conflict goes, the population of Somali veterans is smaller than most campaigns by comparison. I could not have felt more polarized by that. I needed help and I had no one to reach out to. It was no wonder my first marriage disintegrated. I was isolated and distrusting of everyone. So much so that my ex-wife of 8 years still knows very little about my childhood, even to this day. Yes, apparently I've always had big-time trust issues. Imagine that. We separated and reconciled a number of times, and in the last attempt, which also failed miserably as a marriage, resulted in our twins, Austin and Bailey. They were less than a year old when we divorced. I was overjoyed, but that diminished quickly as I felt like an epic failure. Like me, our boys now experienced a broken home. I felt as though no matter what I did, that I was destined to fail. I had children that I loved, and I was seemingly incapable of being a decent parent. It was not long before my ex moved the boys back to Tennessee near Fort Campbell and her parents. We were quickly estranged, if that makes any sense. I was serving at Fort Bragg, and it was practically impossible to see them.